Good morning, everyone. Get everybody in the room. We'll get started. Happy Thursday. Thursday, right? Yes, Thursday. My days, I'm sorry. They're all running together. Happy Thursday. We are extremely excited to have everybody with us this morning. Housekeeping, same housekeeping every day. Y'all know this, but there'd be the one time that I don't say it and somebody will say, I didn't know. So I'll just tell you, if you have questions, type them into the chat box. We utilize that feature. If you're on the YouTube Live, then you can type in your question there and we will ask it if we're still live. Obviously, if we're not live, we won't see it at all. But you can always go on the auxiliary.uga.edu website, click on the auxiliary connections link, and then see the click on the survey and feedback tab, and you will be able to fill out that survey. You can fill it out anonymously. You can fill it out with your name. You can tell us what we're doing, what we're doing good at. You can tell us what we need to improve on. We welcome any and all feedback. So having said all of that, take it away, Randolph.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, it's a great morning. It's a beautiful day outside, kind of cool. But if you get an opportunity to go outside, please do. This is day 4,000 of Bad Hair Day, as you can see. But wanted to say welcome to all of you. So we're going to talk about something today that a lot of people have a fear about, and we'll talk about those fears. It's public speaking, and I hear a lot of people say, I'm terrible. I don't do public speaking. I don't talk about that. I don't, I just, every time I walk in the room, I just can't do it. So I'm going to give you a few pointers and tips about public speaking today. And let me share my screen with you all really quickly. Please have some questions. I see somebody is fooling around with me in there. They say happy Friday. It's not Friday today, y'all. It's Thursday. So if you're like me and you're thinking it's Friday, welcome to the pack and hoping it's Friday. All right, so we're going to talk about public speaking, and I decided to call it the presentation Nuff Said. All right, so there's 4 levels of communication. So there's the intrapersonal level, and we all do this at some point in time. Sometimes we do it in public, and we're walking around and talking to ourselves, and folks look at us like we're crazy. Some of us do it way more than others. I am not going to talk to you about your intrapersonal communication. That's for you and somebody else to take care of, right? Then the second level is that interpersonal communication. There are a number of us who are just extremely good at talking to somebody one-on-one. But unfortunately, once you add a third or a fourth person, then we have a problem. But one-on-one, we can communicate. If it's an idea we're excited about, we can speak ad nauseum to somebody about it. Then the third level is the group communication. So it's between 3 or more people, usually exchanging an idea or trying to reach a common goal or complete a task. The fourth level is public speaking, where that's a point where you're in front of a group or an audience and you are the primary focus of that particular situation. I am actually going to just focus on the middle two. And my point for focusing on the middle two is that if you're capable of really solidifying and nailing your interpersonal and your group communications, we can take some of those same skill sets, same attitudes, and we can become good public speakers. Now, there's the fear of big groups, so I'm not ignoring that particular fear. But if you are a good communicator, your chances of becoming an even better speaker rises astronomically. So for our session today, I'm calling this part 1 of our public speaking engagement. So for today, we're going to talk more about that interpersonal and that group communication and how those pieces can lead to becoming a good public speaker. So typically when I do this class on campus at UGA, we do it for 3 hours. And the goal is, I send out some prompts to participants, and the goal is that we will talk for about an hour about these different tips. And then for the other 2 hours of the class, folks will actually do a public speech. They will do a speech before I talk. Then we'll do the 1 hour session where we talk about the different tips, and then they'll come back and they'll incorporate the speech into our tip. Obviously, we're not going 3 hours today, so I'm going to be talking for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll take questions. And then I have a big challenge for you at the end. Don't be afraid. We're not going to ask you to do something immediately, as in today, but we'll ask you to do something in the very, 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 very near future. So see this as part one. Now that pause was intentional because there are a few people who already are whose knees are shaking that we're going to ask them to do something. Please don't. It's just to be able to better your sense of communication and provide you an audience that you can do that with. So the question most people, or the statement that most people make is, I am so afraid of public speaking. I can talk to people, but by the time you give me a mic or you put me in front of a group, I can't do that. So I wanted to spend a quick minute on telling you why. So there's several different phobias, right? We know the phobia, the fear of dogs is cynophobia. There are people who are greatly afraid of dogs. The fear of germ is either germophobia or mesophobia. The fear of lightning is astrophobia. And the fear of entering public places or big groups is agoraphobia. So some of us, we mix our agoraphobia with the fear of public speaking, which is glossophobia. And you can have a really, really bad combination there. So glossophobia is an actual fear. It's that fear of public speaking. Now you'll ask yourself, why am I so afraid of public speaking? Why is it that I'd rather dig a hole and jump into it when I stand in front of people than to be the one speaking? The psychological reason is that in your mind, you're in a very uncomfortable and a fearful place. Now, our bodies are built to do something when it comes to fear, and it's something really interesting. So what ends up happening, we either get very irritable, we're very edgy, we tense up our muscles. So that's the physiological side. We tense up our muscles. We probably get a little muscle pain in terms of our chest. Some of us will immediately start getting headaches. Some of us, our hands start sweating. For others, we start stuttering our words. We can't really put cohesive sentences together. And if you were to just take away the crowd and you put us in front of an individual or maybe 2 or 3 individuals, we get all those functioning systems back and we're able to articulate what we can. So why are we so afraid? I'll break down a few reasons why people don't make the translation between just having a conversation with somebody and doing the same when you're talking to a bigger group. All right, so Daniel Webster from the Webster Dictionary had this quote that I thought was really, really interesting. It says, if all of my possessions were taken from me, with the exception of one, I would choose to keep the power of communication, for by it, I should regain all of the rest. If you were to think about it like that, Daniel Webster is trying to make a point about the importance of communication and how true communication really gives us the ability to be bigger and broader and wider than ourselves. It gives us an ability to expand. So that's, again, in setting the stage for what we're doing, that's where I want you to see yourself. I don't want us to jump quickly to public speaking at this point. I want us to think more about effective communication and how can I be a better relayer of my thoughts, my perspectives, and my ideas to people on the small scale. And then how can I take the skill sets from that small scale and relay it to a bigger group of people on a larger scale. So let's talk real quickly about the characteristics of an effective speaker. So an effective speaker knows how to analyze and adapt ideas to their audience. So they're able to know who they're talking to, and they're able to relate to who they're talking to. Have you ever met somebody who can come to you and just start a random conversation? And they seem to be the only one really interested in that conversation. And you're looking at them like, are you serious right now? And they're interpreting that look to mean, oh, this person is really engaged right now. Some of us have those in our family. They're the most random folks. They come and they just talk to you about anything, and they have no clue or can't gauge whether or not you're interested or you're moving or you're way beyond what they're saying. An effective speaker also knows how to organize their ideas. And by organizing the idea is not just the randomness of the conversation, but the random pieces of information that are in the conversation they're having. So some people can come to you and say, I would like to talk to you about X. And X may be something that you're interested in. But the way they organize their ideas and the way they relate that idea is something that you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, we were supposed to be talking about cats and dogs, and I love cats and dogs, but I don't know how the elephant and giraffe got involved in this conversation. I don't know how to make the relationship. And that's because they're not able to really organize their ideas in a way that works. So effective speakers are also able to develop information gathering skills. So it's not just relaying information, it's also how do I prepare? How do I ask questions so that I get more information that builds on what I'm trying to talk about? And then they're able to present their ideas effectively. So there are people who think that public speaking is about using a lot of big words. I can come here and I can say concomitant and all of these kind of big Webster dictionary words. And I leave the room feeling really good that I've used 350 big words. And people are saying, I just wasted my time because I have no idea what that person was talking about. So it's being able to present an idea effectively in order for others to understand. And last but not least, people who are effective speakers are also effective listeners, meaning they don't just look at people's mouth move, they actually follow the trend. They've tracked people, they track their interests, they're able to identify the value system that somebody is talking about. They're able to understand what's called the question behind the question and all of that. Now, I think I missed earlier in the presentation, we had a poll, and the poll was asking you, so Catherine, could we go ahead and send the poll? In these 4 levels of conversations, can you tell us which area you think is your best area? So your intrapersonal, your interpersonal, your group, or your public speaking. Which area of the of speaking it's your highest area? I'll give you all about 20 seconds. All right, we got responses coming in. I'll give you all about 10 more seconds. I'll let things slow down a little bit. Right now, we have over 50% of people who are online voting. All right, so we are about 65% of folks who are online voting. And here's how the breakdown is. So we've stopped the poll. So so you all can see the poll right now. 40% of our people, so the highest number, 40% of our people say that communicating between 2 people is their strength. 21% of folks say intrapersonal, so talking to myself is my greatest strength. We have 31% that says talking to a group of people to perform a task or to reach a common goal is a great strength. And then we only have about 7% of the folks who responded to the poll saying making a presentation is their greatest strength. All right, get rid of this poll. I'm going to forward 1 second. There we go. I'm going to go back to where we were. Now, it's good to see that about 30% of the folks say that, actually a good combination of interpersonal and group conversations And so I can tell you confidently that if we have a good number of people who are at those levels, at those high levels in those two areas, I think we ended up with about 70% there. If we have those many people in those two areas that I drew the box around, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back there. Where are we? If we have back there, if we have 70% of our responders who are in those two areas, and only 7% in that last final public speaking area, I can assure you that we can certainly increase the number just by paying attention to some of the details and dynamics of what it takes to be a good interpersonal communicator as well as a good group communicator. All right, so I'm going to move forward a little bit. And so we listed 5 areas that are characteristics of effective speakers. Interestingly, those 5 areas would apply to that second area we were talking about, interpersonal, and that third area we were talking about, group, and it definitely applies to that final area, which is the public speaking area. All right, so let's break things down a little bit more in terms of the components of effective speaking. Now, understand again, this isn't just for our top 2 areas, group and interpersonal. It's also, all of these things can apply to public speaking, but I want us to just not think about public speaking as this stand out there thing. Let's just look at it in terms of these specific components. So the first would be the audience, the second would be the message, and the third would be the delivery. And we'll break each of these down a little bit. So audience analysis, I started to talk about that a little earlier. It involves identifying who your audience is and then adapting what you communicate into their interests, their level of understanding, their attitudes, and their belief. Now, I want to stress these areas. So interest, level of understanding, attitudes, and beliefs. So one of the first things to consider is the audience expectation. And it's good to understand what your audience expects of you, because if you don't, then you may either overshoot or undershoot the communication that's happening. So if somebody's asking you for instructions on how to do something, and you telling them a personal story about your vacation, that just doesn't work. It's great that you did your vacation, but their expectation are specifically instructions on how to do something. So understanding what your audience is expecting. Again, it goes back to what I said earlier about Randolph, if I can use that name. Randolph, the guy that just comes and just talks about things that nobody is talking about, or is not even in the stream of flow of the conversation that's going on. So the next one is the knowledge of the topic. Now, this is where I think a lot of people who take those two middle pieces, so interpersonal conversation and group conversation, and they have a hard time translating it to the public speaking because they feel they're not knowledgeable enough, or they don't have the best knowledge when it comes to a specific area. And I can tell you, if you think you're going to be if you think you're the primary and only source of information on something, you almost never present until you have a very high level of confidence to do that. But if you're coming to provoke thought and to ask questions, again, if you're coming to provoke thought and ask questions, you can still do public speaking, because then you don't have to be the one with the utmost knowledge of the topic, but you can be the one to ask the questions that spark thought and innovation and those things. So think also about the audience knowledge of the topic, your knowledge of the topic, and where some mutual convergence can happen. And then also the attitude towards the topic. Now, here's what I will tell you. You hear people talk about, hey, at work, you can't talk about politics. True, you can talk about politics, but is that the best thing to do? Is it the best way to engage? Are the attitudes towards politics in the workplace something that's convenient for a conversation? Those are judgment calls that you have to make in terms of your audience analysis. Demographics here really refers to, a good example of it will be age. Thinking about talking to our student workers versus talking to our seasoned professionals, folks who've been here for 20 years, or folks who've been here for 10 years, or even folks who've been here for 10 months. versus our student workers. So understanding the demographics of your audience is also very, very, very important. And then thinking about the setting, and then egocentrism refers to not thinking about just you and not thinking about how you portray yourself or how you make yourself bigger than everything else, but understanding also from the audience perspective, are the audience only thinking about their views, their perspectives, their selves, and their own self-well-being? And then making sure that you adapt your communication to address interest, level of understanding, attitudes, and beliefs. So I referred to this earlier. So in terms of the message, you have to think about what is your goal for relaying something to an audience. So am I providing information? Am I influencing thought? Am I stimulating action? Or am I entertaining? And each of those have different aspects that you different things that you have to do. In the interest of our time, we'll focus just on the first two. So providing information and stimulate and influencing thoughts. All right, so let's say you wanted to provide information either in a conversation between you and two people, a group, or a group of more than two, or even a larger group where you're presenting something. And your goal is to provide information, right? The way to look at it is, what kind of information am I providing? Am I providing something about an idea? So it's a concept, a theory. Am I describing something tangible? So I want to talk about how nice this precision pen writes and the flow of the ink and all of that. Or I really want to talk about somebody understanding how to work this grill. Or guess what? We've got these new electric buses. How do we navigate some of these turns? How do we talk about how you can adjust the seats? So am I providing information? The next one will be procedures. Am I giving somebody a step-to-step of how something works? Or am I describing a person or people? Or am I just talking about my family and giving these stories about them? Or hey, am I relaying to somebody what happened, in the spring of 2020 when there was a COVID-19 virus and I had to stay at home and work from home and do all these classes and all of that. So think about your information that you're presenting. The key, one important thing here is then think about also the methods of how you're doing it. So are you defining something? So if somebody says, a health score, and I'm a parking deck attendant, I know what a health score is because I go to restaurants and I check that out before I enter the restaurant, and it determines whether or not I stay in the restaurant or I tell my family, I don't know if we want to eat here. So defining things for your audience, so knowing having a sense of what levels they are in terms of what needs to be defined and what needs to be implied. It could also be describing, so providing more details that address those who, what, when, where, why questions, or narrating something, so telling a story. Now, most of us, we do one of these very well. We either are great at defining things, or we may be great at describing things, or we're great at narrating. So taking a relatable experience and getting people to arrive at an understanding by using that relatable experience. Good public speakers find ways to include all of these things into the information that they're trying to present. So it's not just sitting there and defining a bunch of things for folks, and it's not just describing the intricate details of something, but it's defining, describing, and then finding that point in people's mind where you can say, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to use that example and get you to reach the understanding. I'll give you an example of what happened. So Catherine and I were talking about something the other day, and we were talking about success. We were talking about how not everybody is happy with somebody else's success. And it's interesting. And we had that conversation and we were done with the conversation. And then, believe it or not, I had a thought. I had a relatable experience. So I called Catherine back. I said, look, I'm so sorry. This is random Randolph. I've got a random thought about our conversation we just had to really allow you to capture what I'm trying to describe. And she was like, okay, go ahead, Randolph. And I call Catherine several times a day. So I said, and most of you who have kids who've played sports before, you'll understand this analogy. So you remember when your kid plays sports, or even when you play sports, and your kid's team was losing, or you were losing, and there was that one kid on the opposing team that was just so good. Now they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing everything right. But you just don't like them because they're doing everything right. There's nothing wrong with the kid other than the fact that they're the ones who just keep making all the baskets, or they're the ones who keep scoring all the goals, or they're the ones who is just running past everybody and making everybody else look bad. Nothing that they're doing wrong, but there's something that they're doing things so right that it gets you to a point where you're not very happy with who they are. So being able to take a relatable experience like that and using it to continue my conversation with Catherine about why some people just don't like progress and don't like to see others progressing was another way of me sending out my message. All right. So last piece on the message, I told you we were going to talk about either providing information or influencing thought. So this is the influencing thought piece. And influencing thought really has to do with how do I change or reinforce what people are predisposed to. And a predisposition is basically where it's something that I've been taught over time, and I'm always going to go down that route. There's been a lot of conversations recently about shaking hands. People are still having a hard time not shaking hands because we're always predisposed to walking up to somebody and shaking their hands and saying hello. So that's a predisposition. The other piece is changing or reinforcing a belief. Now, I believe there's something that really says whether something is right or wrong. And so being able to provide communication that says, well, if this is what you believe, you're right for believing that. Or if this is what you believe, let me show you something else that may change that belief that you have. Or value. So it's that intrinsic, I'm going to use the word values to define value, but it's this concept of what we see things as, the importance of what we see things as, or behavior. A lot of what we're doing over these COVID times is trying to change the values and change the behavior of our people in terms of expanding themselves, in terms of growing, in terms of really spending time with family, and in terms of staying safe and healthy before we come back together. Now, here's the methods. Definitely your credibility, so your competence and trustworthiness really speaks to whether or not you were able to influence thought, influence attitudes, influence values and behavior. The logic, so the rationale. Basically, it's not random Randolphs just talking random things and saying, so you should accept what I just said, or you should believe what I just said. But it's providing some sort of a logic that people can look at and say, you know what, that makes sense. And then emotions. How do I evoke emotions? How do I touch people in a way that they get emotionally involved in the importance of what I'm saying or in the magnitude of what I'm saying? All right. So let's talk about the message real quickly. Let me check my time here to see where we are. Got a few more minutes. Let's talk about the message. So the organization of the message is really, really important. And so there's several ways that you can organize how you're relaying something to somebody, either in an interpersonal, in a group, or in a larger public speaking setting. So chronologically, so you say, hey, the semester starts the school year starts in August. And so in the summer, we do X, Y, Z in preparation for August. Or in the summer, we're really busy with these type of students. But then in the fall, you have all these new freshmen that come, and then we still have to deal with the sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And then we have these big events that happen. So chronologically, you're moving things from either the most recent backwards or the most historic up to the most recent. So topically, so you think about in terms of how, not just the order in terms of time, but the order in terms of structure. So a good example of that would be, I like the concept of the electric buses. So you say, hey, so in the morning I wake up and I drive the electric bus. Well, yeah, you do, but guess what? The bus has to be charged first. So you can talk about the charging process before the actual driving of the electric bus, etc. So that's topically in terms of organization. So spatially in terms of location. So this happens here and this happens here and this happens here. And these pieces fit together this way. You can talk about it in terms of cause and effect. So in order for your burger to be done properly and in order for your customers to enjoy the burger that you've cooked, you can't just put the burger on the grill and walk away and 3 hours later go and pick it up, right? So if you leave the burger on the grill for 3 hours, you will have a charbroiled something that may not necessarily be a burger. And then the last piece in terms of organization is problem and solution, right? So now we have a burned burger. What do? We unfortunately have to throw that one away and start a new burger. And so describing or providing messages that also look at status and correction is important. Think again, I'm throwing a lot at you, but I'm throwing it at you because communication isn't this random thing. And those who are great communicators aren't just random. They pay attention to how the message is to what the message is, to the audience interest in the message, to the beliefs, values, and attitudes that an audience bring to a particular message, to the organization of the message. And then they also pay attention to how the message is delivered. Now this one, I have a few things I want to just talk to you. I want you to go back in your mind's eye and think about the last person who you heard speak. It can be either in a big group setting or something you watch on TV, or just a one-on-one conversation you had with somebody. And think about these two things. I'm actually going to start from the bottom of the screen on vocal delivery. So think about the vocal delivery. So there are a couple of things. There are people who, in their vocal delivery, they have what I call the confirmation effect, right? And I just did that. So they say, so I want you to go and I want you to understand this, right? Or they say yes, or they say okay. So there's always are looking for confirmation after every sentence. The other thing are the people who have fillers. So fillers are the ones that say, they put these things in between their words. So I would like to go to the store so that when I do this, then you'll understand. The other one are the people who have these things that I call the enders. So the enders are the ones that put a whole sentence behind a sentence that they just did. You know what I'm saying? Again, I'll say it again. The enders are folks who put a whole sentence behind a sentence that was just completed. Like, you know what I'm saying? So there are people who can't finish a sentence without starting you know what I'm saying? You feel me? Every time they say a sentence, they add, you know what I'm saying? And then last but not least are the people who they have what I call vocal jiu-jitsu, right? Jiu-jitsu is this kind of martial arts stuff. And the vocal jiu-jitsu people are the people who, when you're following their voice, you almost are confused because then they always either end up with their voice going up, right? And every time I was looking at when people were talking, they keep going up and up and up and up and up and up. And they never have the ability to moderate their tone or moderate their voice or moderate their pitch in what they're saying. So why am I talking about these areas that I just listed? It's because when you're speaking to a group of people and they're following you, they're following every single piece and every single aspect. They're looking at how directly you're interacting with them. They're looking at how loud your voice is if you're making a point, or even how soft your voice is if you're making a point. They're looking at how the sentences that you're putting together make sense. They're looking at how, or their mind's eye are following just about every concept. And so all of the things that I just explained to you are really, 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 really distractions in those concepts. So that confirmation, you know what I'm saying? Well, the confirmation in always asking a question, right? Means that I then, as a listener, will have to stop and think, does he want an answer there? And by the time you do that 4 or 5 times, I'm confused as to whether I should be answering this guy or I should go on. I did see a hand raised. from Chuck. I can pause for a second, Catherine, and take Chuck's question, just so we don't mix that thought.
He didn't type in a question. I don't know if his hand raise was more of a affirmation of yes, preach it, brother, or what. But yeah, it's
All
it's
right,
gone
Chuck.
now. So
All right, Chuck. I'll take.
he was giving you, maybe that wasn't a hand raise, it was a high five.
All right, I'm going to give you a virtual high five as well, Chuck. Again, the point that I'm making with in terms of the delivery and talking about the different things that people do in their vocal delivery is because it's really distracting to the listener to be able to follow those things. So I'll repeat the things again. So there's the confirmation, right? The person who asks you at the end of every sentence to acknowledge what you just said, okay? Right? So that's a confirmation piece. And again, the problem with that is every time they ask a question, my mind is battling whether or not to provide a response or just ignore what they said. And if I start ignoring parts of their presentation or parts of what they're saying, I start ignoring bigger. If I start ignoring small chunks, I start ignoring bigger chunks. So the confirmation folks are the folks with the fillers. Every time they're saying something, they always add no, my brain cannot follow the key points or the key words that they're using because they're adding these fillers that are distracting to the process of understanding what they're saying. The enders, right? You know what I'm saying? So when I ask you to do something, you know what I'm saying? I just want you to really just go and do it. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? You know, so those people, again, they always break the trend of thought for somebody. Or last but not least, the people whose voices are just not in consonance or just not in agreement with the concept that they're trying to do. So if they're explaining a story, that really is a story that requires contemplation, but they're talking so loud and so fast that I can't really understand what they're saying. First is, I really want you to understand the magnitude of what we're talking about in terms of America has never in its time had an opportunity to do something like this or to be in this situation. Now, for many of us, this is not the greatest situation, but for some of us, this situation provides us an opportunity to look at life and look at things differently. So, and a speaker who's able to do all of that. A lot of people, so I spend a lot of time on the vocal delivery because the vocal delivery is probably your biggest area of communicating and making sure that your message is received properly from the speaker. In the interest of time, I'll move on to the methods. So there are people who can who can sit down and write everything that they have to say, and they say it. That's good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with reading a pre-developed script. All I will tell you is if you're reading a pre-developed script, don't just live in the script, but make sure that you're making contact with your audience. Make sure that you're having the confirmation, not by asking right or not by saying, you know what I'm saying, but by making eye contact, by checking in, by pausing, by moderating your voice, pitch, and the like. There's also people who can memorize a whole speech and just say it. Now, those people have great memory. That's a strength that they have. There's nothing wrong with that. But the same rules that apply to somebody reading a manuscript will apply to you as well. Make sure to allow enough time for pause so that the audience actually gets some of the concepts you're sending out to sink in. Make sure you're checking in with people's eyes and their attention. Make sure you're moderating your vocal delivery in a way that it's either stressing those things that you really want to stress or stepping back from those things that you don't want the audience to grasp on too much. And then there's the impromptu folks who can wake up and you tell them, let's talk about something, and they talk about it now. Unfortunately, most people who are the impromptu delivery folks, they're overconfident, and overconfidence is a bad thing in public speaking because you never prepare enough to be able to deliver a content that an audience is really willing to understand and accept and implement. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with impromptu speakers. There's some situations in life where you have to be impromptu. What I am saying is that if you are an impromptu speaker, ask yourself, am I a great impromptu speaker or am I overconfident? And in most cases, most impromptu speakers tend to be a little overconfident. And so the focus is not on the exchange between them and the audience. The focus becomes on themselves as the speaker. And then there's the extemporaneous. Big word that says, I can take a couple.
Randolph, are you there? He talked himself into a crash. Hang on, we'll give him a second. I noticed his internet was teetering there for a minute, so let's give him just half a second. Sorry. At least he didn't get frozen with a super goofy look on his face. Randolph. Hopefully he's noticed that he is that he is frozen in time. Hang on. Give us just a second and we'll see. Yeah, he dropped completely out. He's gonna be all in a tizzy when he gets back. So give him just a second. We like your trucker hat, Robert. That's nice. Okay, I'll unmute you.
You know, all the stuff that Randolph's been talking about is really good. And when you think about it, some of the things you want to think about, especially if you're doing public speaking, is your atmosphere around you. Of course, right now I'm wearing, she referred to it as my trucker hat, but it's actually my niche pizza hat. So I'm representing still today as well. But when you're looking at it and you're thinking about it, and he was talking about different styles of public speaking, and whether you're reading off a manuscript or doing it through an impromptu or any of the other methods that you're looking at, when you're focusing on your audience, sometimes it helps people not to focus directly on individuals because it tends to make them freeze up. But other things that are really challenging when you're looking at that too is a podium. And often people look at the podium as a safe zone to be able to talk from. But what people tend to do is start to focus on their notes and start to focus on the podium itself and really grasp onto the podium as if it's a life preserver. And you really want to be able to free yourself up from that, move away from that, and think more about how you're interacting with the audience. I myself do a lot of presentations, and I'm able to know what my general outline is and be very comfortable with the content and go forward with that. But if I get behind a podium or if I have notes, it tends to make me freeze up more than it does if I have the freedom to be able to engage with the audience, watch what the expressions are, and know what's happening around them. So hopefully we'll get a chance to get Randolph back here as soon as he finds his internet again. So we'll let him continue with his speech.
Thank you, Robert.
So can you all hear me?
Yep.
My wife unplugged the internet because she said I was talking too much. No, I'll finish up. I'll stop here just in the interest of time. Again, this is part one. And once we're able to get back to campus, we'll be more than happy to do other parts where people can actually present ideas and concepts that they have. But here's my big challenge to all of you. My big challenge to all of you, and can you still hear me, Catherine?
Yes.
Oh, great.
You're still
great.
Still with us for the moment. That's good. Welcome back.
Okay. Good. So here's my big challenge. Every day we send you all an email, and we also post a video message. So if you go to, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So every day, when you go to the auxiliary connection site, let's hope my internet cooperates. If it doesn't, on the site, there's video messages. So you see, let's bigger. Today's message was a message of Brian and his son, playing a song. It's a beautiful video, right? So here's my big challenge to you. And we have messages under auxiliary messages. You will see a number of messages there. So every daily video message is included there. So we have Brian and his son. We have messages from Darnell and Greg, because we've asked them to be the people who help us with our daily messages. You all also have messages from UGA coaches that are just telling you thank you for the work you've done and asking you to be safe. But those messages are specific for our auxiliary employees. We're really grateful to those coaches for doing that. Greg always does a message from somewhere around his beautiful home or farm. Again, we've got Kirby Smart on here. We've got Coach Johnny Taylor, the women's basketball coach, and then messages from Robert and Brett. So here's my challenge. Here's my public speaking challenge to you. The challenge is, can you participate and send us a daily message? The message is just going to say your name, say which unit you're with, how long you've been with the University of Georgia. You don't have to put a date or a time stamp, but you can certainly add an inspirational quote or a something that you want to make sure that the auxiliary family knows or should hear. Send us those. We've added on the resources link just some tips about how to do those video messages. So go to the additional resources link. I'll check and see if it's there. I just asked the team to put it up there, so it may not be there yet. They did. So it says tip for shooting videos. Go on that link, add your pieces, read through how we want those videos to happen. And I challenge you to send those videos to us, and we will post them on our auxiliary messages, or we would use some of them, depending on the quality of the video, we would use some of them for our daily message. So if you've ever been afraid to put yourself out there or afraid to be seen, listen, we're going to put you behind the screen. I'm challenging you to test it out with a video message, introducing yourself, telling us a quote, or giving us some sort of words of inspiration. So I'm going to stop talking because we have about 12 minutes and then take the questions that we have.
All right, so we haven't really had any questions. See, I'm an ummer, and it doesn't mean that I don't. I'm trying to remember what I'm thinking. My memory is horrid, and I'm trying to make sure I stay on task. That's I'm not just going quiet. So I will work on my ums. Okay.
So here's the tip for ums, Catherine. The tip for ums is slow down your delivery process. So you don't have to say everything you have to say, and a pause is fine. Just requires the brain to pick up on something, right? So just slow down the delivery so that you catch up with the thought process that's going on upstairs.
If I don't say it all while I'm thinking about it, I'll forget it. You've talked
and it's okay.
Ask anybody on my team and they will tell you I have to get it all out. And then I sometimes have to say, wait, what were we talking? How did we get there? So yeah, just
so whatever. think about effective, and this is not just for Catherine, this is for everybody else. What Catherine is talking about is a great example of I have to get it all out. The question becomes, did the people receive everything that I got out? And you have to find that balance between what I want to relay and what people are actually catching and receiving. It's like whack-a-mole. If all the moles are coming up at the same time, people can't whack all those moles, or they can't catch everything that you're sending. So think about the audience and moderate the delivery.
So what's your most memorable occasion in regards to public speaking? What were the most memorable events, both positive and negative, and what did you learn from these instances?
Oh man, my most memorable public speaking event. That's a great question. So I've had an opportunity to speak at events of 5,000 plus people, and I've had an opportunity to speak to speak one-on-one with folks. I will tell you that my most memorable is when I talk to And this is not a public speaking event, but it was really just when I was growing up and talking to my mom. And I went to a workshop one day. I was 13, went to a workshop, and it was a day-long workshop, and for 7 days. And I would come back home, and my mom would have to sit there and listen to every single word that the presenter said, because I was kind of practicing how to be a public speaker. And so when I think about public speaking, I think about the drooling years that my mom had to sit and listen to everything I had to say. And I see that in my daughter too, where she's random Raina. She will come and try to talk about these random things, regardless of where we are or what we're doing. The worst public speaking thing I had was I was invited to talk about something, but what happened was, I was invited to speak at a university. And this was about 3 years ago. I was working with a big university in New Jersey, and I was invited to talk about change, and because they had just purchased this new building. Long story short, the building purchase fell through. People were afraid of losing their jobs, and it all happened 2 days before I arrived on campus. And so I'm coming with this upbeat, let's talk about all these exciting things, and people were afraid of losing their job. I don't know if I did the best job. I shifted, but it was one of the most difficult things, because and I was spending the full day with and there was about 200 people I was supposed to spend the whole day doing a training with. And it took me all morning to get them to relax and really listen to what I was trying to say to them. And I understood it was because people were afraid that this $22 million purchase had fallen through, and they were about to lose their jobs.
So what would be something you would suggest as far as addressing a hostile group?
So storytelling. So somebody told me that I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories. I like to relay things to people so that they use their own sense of self to make sense of what I'm saying. So if you're addressing a hostile group, storytelling is great. And I'll give you the same example. A part of what I had done in my investigation in my planning for my engagement with these people, I had gone back and I had seen what this unit had done. I had read some of their reports, and there were actually some famous people who had come out of this particular institution. And so being able to tell a story, some of the stories that I saw, being able to relay my own personal story of years of war in Liberia to some of the struggles that some of the people in that room have been able to overcome, shifted the focus from us talking about, hey, are you really about to lose your job, to us talking about controversy and listen the word. But calamities happen, struggles happen, but there's some great learning opportunities that come out of those, that people become better and bigger and stronger. If you think about COVID-19, it's actually a great time for us to step back and realize how we're working, how we're engaging, and what are the ways that as an individual, I can better myself through this particular difficult circumstance. So storytelling, particularly personal storytelling, is a really good way to connect with an audience that's kind of hostile and sitting with their arms crossed and really don't want to engage.
Maggie's response to how to deal with the hostile crowd was to run. She said, "Run!" exclamation point. When you're addressing a group that might have more knowledge than you do about a specific topic, how do you engage them to give input?
I ask questions, and that's what I meant when I say, as the speaker, you're not always the one who has all the knowledge. In fact, for most speakers, I will tell you, entering the room as a person who has some of the knowledge that needs to be reinforced by others in the room is really a good way, because that forces you to ask questions, to make statements that provoke thought, to pause and let the audience talk back to you. Because some of the most fascinating things I've learned not by saying to people what they should know, but by asking people about what haven't I considered. And so asking what else is out there, what haven't you considered? It's a hard thing for most speakers to do because they feel like they should be the one providing the information. But I was speaking to somebody on the HR team the other day, and I explained to them that the way adults learn and the way children learn are very different. And I want you to think about that. Children, they learn, they're almost like an empty vessel. Now, some of them don't think they are, but they're almost like an empty vessel that you're pouring information into. And so the way that you pour information into children will be diametrically different from an adult. An adult, that bottle is already full. So you can't be pouring anything else in. You have to find ways to use the information already in that bottle to interact. It's almost like this two-part epoxy. And if you know what a two-part epoxy is, it's almost like a glue, right? It's one of the strongest glues out there, but it comes in two pieces. And one tube has one and the other tube has the other. If you just use this tube, nothing's gonna stick because it's not able to stick. If you just use this tube, nothing's gonna stick. You have to put the two tubes together in order for it to stick. And so teaching adults or doing public speaking to adults, you always have to understand that their cups are already full. And so how can I add that second part of the epoxy so that something sticks, but also how can I learn from this experience and what questions can I ask to provoke thought? I call that the mosquito concept. And the mosquito concept is where I'm gonna bite you, I'm gonna leave, and there's still gonna be a little scratch there for you to think about later on.
What about, Robert said, think about introverts versus extroverts. That's a big one.
So can I say something real quickly about introverts and extroverts? So introverts and extroverts, it seems like there is this idea that they're on these opposite side of the spectrum. True, but there's something really interesting about these two groups that most people don't consider. So let's talk about introverts. Now, extroverts can go out and they can speak and they can do all of this extemporaneous stuff. Yes. We're not asking introverts to become extroverts, but we're asking extroverts and introverts to see what's that area of connection. And I'll tell you what I believe are the areas of connection. The area of connection in my thought is really extroverts are able to walk into a room and understand that they need to build relationships with people. And those relationships don't have to be this deep. Those relationships can be as shallow as this, but they're points of contact. So extroverts make lots of points of contact in a short period of time. Introverts walk in the room and their thought is, I have to get in a deep relationship with folks. And since I can't, and since the time don't allow me to get in a deep relationship with people, then I'd rather not do it. And then if I get one-on-one with somebody, then I can really get deep with them. Take that and apply that to public speaking. Understand that, again, there's a mutual giving and taking that happens. So as an introvert, asking prompting questions where you do less of the talking and the audience give more of the feedback. It's a great tool and a great way of still doing public speaking, whereas you're not the focus. So it's shifting the focus from you to making the true focus about the audience. But I will tell you, I had to say this thing about introverts and extroverts because people always feel that introverts always feel every relationship has to be this deep, whereas extroverts are able to create these spot relationships that benefit them over time. So I consider myself to be an extrovert. So I will tell you, I have lots of friends on campus. I know very little about a lot of the people that I know on campus, but I've decided I'm going to create these spot relationships that I can grow and mature over time rather than these deep relationships with every single person because time wouldn't allow for me to do that.
Extroverts, they seem to feed on the large crowd, and introverts are exhausted by large crowd.
True.
So is there, oh, we do need to talk about the, sorry, one of the dogs is having an issue over here, sorry.
That's
We do
a
need
good
to talk
coworker.
about the plan for getting those videos.
All right, so we'll modify the tip sheet. If it's not included there, we'll include a way of how you can submit the videos. You can upload them to a drive and we'll see them. Again, we'll try to feature as many as possible. I'm trying to make sure you're recording them in a place that's lighter so that the quality of the video is better. But I challenge you all, we are open to really seeing more faces on our daily videos. And it's a great opportunity for you to step in to public speaking, even if you're an introvert.
Excellent. Well, and we will get back to everybody. Keep watching the message for the messages. We may even include it in the next auxiliary connections message email that goes out, just to point you towards where that is. Once we get a plan together, the marketing communications team is doing a mad scramble right now to get us a place to put those. So shout out to them for trying to get that together for us as quickly as possible, you know, especially when Randolph throws things at us at, 5 minutes before his session is about to start. He's been hanging out with Robert too long, stirring that pot.
I'm a junior pot stirrer, right?
Ooh,
I'm a junior pot
okay.
stirrer.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this morning. We're really glad everybody was here. Thank you, Randolph. Much appreciation for the presentation. I'll work on my ums. You'll work on your random Randolphs. We'll come back together. We'll get there eventually, maybe, sort of. But we will see you this afternoon if you're part of the afternoon group. Today's is the Village Summit and the Niche at Health Science Campus. So you be on the lookout for your email that should be coming out very, very, very soon, like in the next 5 minutes or so. And then we'll see you tomorrow.
Hey, auxiliary family, we absolutely miss you all. Take care of yourselves, and we definitely see you all soon. I think I'm never going to sit at my desk again when we get back to work. I'm going to come out and see all of you 100 times. So.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.